If you thought we were done with LS1 just because we went through the entire series, you're sorely mistaken, my friends. No, now we're looking at all the extra little weird additions to the series that came about from various avenues. First thing we're going to be talking about is actually something I mentioned in the retrospective, and that would be the side stories Wrath, Murderer, Parallel, Nightmare, Red, and Imbalance. Nightmare and Red were the only two stories that were ever actually fully realized. These were the origin stories of Nightmare and Red, respectively. Nightmare details the events of Nightmare's introduction episode from Nightmare's point of view, as well as describing his time as a ghost and how he found the Jake body he ends up taking possession of at the end of the Area 51 episode. Red is a much more comprehensive origin piece, detailing Red's life in the underworld as a weak demon cloud, his exile from the underworld by the Demon Council, his life while in exile, and how he found the Nias clone body he inhabits at his introduction. Red is pretty much the one place Red's origin is ever explained, essentially, and the most information that's ever revealed about Red as a character. Wrath was the origin story of Antaeus, told in 3 parts, detailing how he was assigned by the Demon Council to be a representative of Wrath and Ilia. This one was complete and can be found on DeviantArt. Well, I should say complete with an asterisk. In actuality, there were plans for the story to go on all the way to the telling of events of Antaeus' introduction episode, Rise of the Anti-Jake, from Antaeus' perspective, but this never happened. What's on DeviantArt is all that was ever written. Imbalance was Yang's origin story, also complete with an asterisk. The story was actually rushed out to coincide with something we'll talk about later on, and was deemed finished at a point much earlier than I'd originally conceived. I'd originally planned for the story to extend all the way into the full events of Yang's introduction episode in the series, but it only ended up skimming the beginning of it. What the story did do, though, was give the only detailing of Yang's backstory in the entirety of Lightning Speed, including the introduction of a character named Wesley, the man that discovered and raised Yang. Then we come to the clearly incomplete ones, Murderer and Parallel, the origin stories of Nias and Parellus respectively. These two stories were actually greatly intertwined. Nias' side explains how he met Nyla and why he wanted to get out of the reverse world, the reason being to try to find Nyla, who had escaped before him, and stop her from realizing her plans to become a reverse eater, as she eventually did in Season 19. Parellus' side was his struggle to locate and capture Nias after he escaped from the reverse world not once but twice. Nias' story only ended up making it to right after his first escape from the reverse world, though, and only his first meeting with Nyla was posted. But Parellus made it all the way to Nias' second escape, although not all of that was posted either. Parellus' story, though, also kind of artificially extended Nias' story in a way. Essentially, the first escape extended into the events of Nyla's demise, Scylla's turnaround, where, like I said in the retrospective, it's revealed that Parellus was the one that told Lola, aka Insert Wonder Girl here, about reverses after Nyla's death. This occurred simultaneously with Parellus capturing Nias and hauling him to reverse jail. The second escape was meant to extend into Nias' side of the events of Reverse Roll, his introduction episode, and on Parellus' side into Nias the Jailbird, Parellus' introduction episode. This never ended up coming to fruition. But now that we've gotten those out of the way, we can now move on into, drumroll, non-canon content! This is the part I've been waiting for. So before we move full force into Lightning Speed's non-canon content, I want to talk a bit about Cannonfire. Cannonfire is a series of mine that basically shatters the fourth wall and exposes the inner workings of the Megaverse, as it were. The Megaverse consists of literally everything I've ever created, and Lightning Speed is no exception. We'll talk more about Cannonfire later, but the thing I want to mention now is that because of Cannonfire, there is a certain time stream structure to my creations. Specifically, Lightning Speed rests in a specific place in the time stream, and there are a lot of things that technically exist as AUs that branch off of it. I'm going to talk about them in chronological order. That means that first we get to talk about Unbreakable, which was actually canon to Lightning Speed 1 for a hot minute before getting retconned into AU territory. It was an Invader Zim fanfiction, and it wasn't even written by me. Unbreakable was written by an old friend of mine, and revolved around her Invader Zim OCs Heidi, Max, Zin, and Vorks. You might be wondering where Lightning Speed fits into all of this. Well, that friend and I used to roleplay our characters a lot in private chats, and, well, Nias and Heidi hit it off and the stars aligned. Nias and Heidi actually became a romantic relationship, which was featured within Unbreakable. Antaeus and Dahlia also showed up in the story as well, first showing up as villains before taking a backseat as side characters. I mean, Dahlia was also planned to show up in one of my own Invader Zim fanfictions at one point, but that one never saw the light of day. Anyway, it was sometime during Unbreakable's run when that friend of mine created a pair of theoretical children for Nias and Heidi. These children, Dante and Jupiter, immediately stole my heart. It was Dante and Jupiter that spawned the future AU, also known as the Lightning Speed Love Children AU, or 7. This brought other theoretical children into the fray, including Jake and Rose's son Ryan, Antius and Dahlia's daughter Estella, Wreath and Mandy's twins Rena and Ren, and Nightmare and Mallory's daughter Thicket. Then Cannonfire 1 happened. Honestly, Cannonfire really does deserve its own video, which will happen eventually, but to sum it up for the purposes of this video, the story featured Dante and Jupiter after the world decides they don't need to exist anymore, and they have to board a train to a place called Cannonfire in order to escape being erased from existence. Halfway there, though, they jump out of the train and end up in the time period of LS1. The story was actually the first time I revealed Yang to the world, as well as when I revealed the change of Nias' canon love interest from Heidi to Winona, thereby removing Unbreakable from LS1 canon. At the end of the story, though, Dante and Jupiter are allowed to return to an AU reflective of the world they left, which was what created the 7 AU in the first place. But why is the 7 AU called the 7 AU? Well, that was because at one point I wanted to make a distinct story off of this AU, which I called 7 because of the 7 children of the AU. The story would actually have followed a post-apocalyptic future where the children, along with their parents, would have struggled to survive during, well, the apocalypse. Also, Nias would be dead. Oops. The strangest thing about 7, though, would have been that Antius and Yang would have been slated to appear in their LS1 iterations, which meant they would have been the same age as they were in LS1. I think I wanted to explain this as Antius being immortal, but Yang would have actually been separated from Nias after Nias' death and given a second chance at life somehow. Nothing about 7 ever panned out, though, and the entire thing was canned when Dante and Jupiter were taken back to Cannonfire and Cannonfire 2, never to return to reality. Right quick, though, Cannonfire 2 was actually meant to take place during the reboot of Lightning Speed 1 into Lightning Speed 2, and one of the main characters of Cannonfire 2 was actually Nightmare, who was taken to Cannonfire during the story because of his removal from Lightning Speed during the reboot. He's planned to be a main character in future installments as well as a good friend of Dante and Jupiter, because yes, the series is still ongoing. The third installment is slated to come out very soon. Oh, also, before we leave Cannonfire, which honestly features too many Lightning Speed characters for me to efficiently mention, I want to mention 2 of the other main characters of the Cannonfire series. These 2 other main characters are actually Flick and the anomaly version of Wreath from Season 40. These 2 are the time agents that escort Dante and Jupiter to Cannonfire in the first 2 installments and become friends with them, so that's fun. On a less related note, even though it's not actually a point in the AU list, I do want to talk briefly about some of the character roleplays from that time that I did with friends. I was actually smart enough to save some of them, and I still look through them occasionally. Some of the plot lines got really wild, but it's actually where characters like Nias and Nightmare ended up getting the sillier aspects of their personalities, and where certain character interactions really blossomed. Antius and Nias' friendship was exemplified in the roleplays, and it's probably the reason I came to enjoy their dynamic so much. Bless. From there, though, we move into The Bar. The Bar was a stupid inside joke that somehow found a home as an actual AU for some reason. This picture should show you everything you need to know while also not saying enough because I don't feel the need to talk about this AU anymore. It was dumb. The MMD-verse is another thing that stemmed off dumb jokes, and it's pretty much only an AU because it's listed as an AU in other places on my AU map. MMD is a 3D model posing/animating program that kind of stemmed out of the Vocaloid community, and I put together some lazily crafted lightning speed models for the program, namely Jake, Rose, and Nias. There were also unfinished versions of Antius and Mandy floating around in my folders as well. Jake showed up in a few of my old MMD images, and Rose and Nias showed up in like 1 each. Fun fact, the most favorited thing I have on DeviantArt is actually a picture of MMD Jake, except it only has that many favorites because of the jewel hearts that the image advertises as a download for. I made the jewel hearts for MMD because I saw an upload of half the model from a user called Rainbow Llama, and I asked them if I could put the halves together and recolor them a few times to make the jewel hearts from LS1. Well, the download for those ended up getting more popular than I ever imagined, and I actually see them pop up a fair number of times. Like, I'll be watching poorly made MMD videos for cheap giggles and see those dang hearts pop up, and I'm like, wow, this is my legacy, isn't it? I suppose this topic also gives me a perfect excuse to segue into Trouble Baka Boys. While not related to MMD, the MMD version of Jake was based off his appearance in the initial image. For those not in the know, Triple Baka is a Vocaloid song by Lamaze P that features an animated music video of Hatsune Miku, Kasane Teto, and Akira Neru doing silly whatnot. I thought it was cute, so I drew Jake, Antius, and Nias as the girls in the video. Then I actually planned to do a Triple Baka animation for Lightning Speed's anniversary in 2018, but it never ended up getting even close to completion and I abandoned it. Here's at least what I got done, though. Yes, I did trace. I'm a dirty cheater. After that, though, is when we get into the really interesting AUs, starting with the Pokemon AU I briefly mentioned when talking about the scrapped Sharon stuff in LS1. The Pokemon AU, much like the Sharon nonsense, also stemmed from Pokemon Black and White, but it came afterward, was completely different, and contained no Sharon in sight. The gist of the AU was that Jake suddenly found himself in the Unova region, where he was given a starter Pokemon by Professor Juniper in order to start a Pokemon journey. This Pokemon was Snivy, specifically one that had a condition that wouldn't allow it to evolve because Ash Ketchum did it, why can't I? In fact, Jake actually met Ash Ketchum at one point in the AU, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So Jake started on his Pokemon journey, got some gym badges, fought Team Plasma, obtained a Simipour at some point, and generally had a good time. Other characters showed up in this AU as well. Rose showed up with a Minccino, and Mandy had a Lucario at one point. Antius and Nias also played the villains after Jake defeated Team Plasma early in the Pinwheel Forest. Antius had an entire team consisting of 2 Litwicks, 2 Lampents, a Chandelure, and a Gengar, because what's diversity? And Nias caught a Misdreavus, which actually ended up being best friends with a Sneasel that kept on stalking Nias afterwards to try to get Nias to release Misdreavus back into the wild. As I said, there was one particular point where Jake actually met Ash Ketchum, and Antius and Nias actually teamed up with Team Rocket to cause trouble. That one was fun. The events in Unova actually went all the way until Jake's 8th gym battle, funny enough. After that, though, Jake's adventures in the Unova region came to a close. And then there was the Kalos chapter. In the Kalos chapter, Wreath actually joined Jake in his journey. Wreath's team, which he caught over the course of the Kalos chapter, consisted of a Drifloon for those irony points, a Kirlia, and a Joltik, while Jake's new capture in the Kalos chapter was a Shuppet, which evolved into a Banette that can Mega Evolve. Please, don't ask why I chose the Pokemon I did. It was the course of the story that dictated it, not I. The Kalos chapter ended abruptly before the second gym, and I don't remember that incredibly much about it. Then, during LS2, I played around with the idea of an Alola chapter, this time featuring the LS2 version of Jake wondering what the heck is going on with these Pokemon that seem to remember him while he doesn't remember anything, but that never really happened. Oh, what's that in the distance? Could that be the Nightmare Manor OCT? Frick, I feel so bad about the Nightmare Manor OCT every single day of my life. So to explain right fast what an OCT is for the uninitiated, the acronym stands for Original Character Tournament, and it's an event where character creators pit their characters against each other in story form to see whose character is superior, as determined by a panel of judges. These used to be extremely plentiful on DeviantArt, and I'd entered one before the days of Nightmare Manor OCT. Nightmare Manor, though, was special in the fact that rather than participating, I was actually the creator of the OCT as well as one of the judges. The premise of the Nightmare Manor OCT was that Antius and Nias had kidnapped competitors from many different dimensions and dumped them all in the Nightmare Manor, aka Nightmare's house. The competitors then had to fight to survive each other to make it to the next round. The tournament went fine up until round 2, where there was only one unfinished entry after the passing of 2 separate deadlines, which essentially killed the entire tournament. Even still, the event was a lot of fun, and I still make jokes all the time about Nightmare being angry that Antius and Nias let these random people come in and trash his house, particularly the guy that blew up his library, and the guy that broke his bathroom faucet and flooded the bathroom, and the fricker that broke all his vases and scratched Kaiba's hair into the walls and left dead centipedes everywhere. Good times. Oh, I get to talk about Red Queen now. Flashback to Christmas of 2013. We're talking about MMD again. I wanted a Christmas image. I wanted a romance piece. Flashback a little further. Inside joke. Hatsune Miku is in love with a cloud because why does she need anyone else in her life? Me. Wait, Red's a cloud. Bam. Christmas crack ship picture. Red and Miku. Hey, that's cute, actually. So the Red Queen Miku ship was born. Then, later, Red Queen Miku Fusion was born. A Steven Universe-style fusion of Red and Miku into a 7-foot-tall loser woman. Then it became my entire internet identity. In 2015, I jumped onto Tumblr with the username Red Queen Miku. A year later, I changed my DeviantArt name to match. 2 years after that, I assumed Miku as a pseudonym. A year after that, I started a YouTube channel, assuming the identity of the Red Queen to debunk crappy theories. Then things get weird. A month after the YouTube channel started, I was invited to join a Discord server called MarioVerse. I tell you, that place changed me. So as circumstances unfolded, lore became a thing, some of which I accidentally originated, and Mario-verse first became a thing. Red Queen Miku essentially became my persona with a crap ton of lore as to why she is the way she is, involving getting thrown out of her world during the Diametrics reboot and losing her memories and all that jazz, and BAM! Sometimes I still think of scenarios where Red and Miku are an adorable couple and they melt me. I'm sorry, I'm too attached. So this next one isn't even on my AU list, but there's a story flying around somewhere in my records where Jake gets inserted into the world and events of Sonic Adventure. It was extremely poorly written and features myself as a cringy self-insert. Those of you that know can stuff it. Anyway, it was stupid. That, however, leads us into the final AU of Lightning Speed 1, a tale of mistrust and deceit, a story of survival by any means necessary and the destruction of the man that thought he had nothing to lose. Welcome to the epic tale of the Origins OCT. The Origins OCT began in the summer of 2015, over half a year after the end of LS1. The tournament would then extend into the start of 2016. Origins actually started before LS2, but extended into LS2's run, despite technically being LS1-based content, as I stated directly that the events took place after the end of LS1. Yeah, Origins was a really weird one timeline-wise. It was like LS1 didn't truly die until half a year into LS2's run, and that's hilarious to me. I entered the tournament with Nias and Yang, unprepared for what exactly this tournament was going to do to Lightning Speed as a whole. Because I would be lying if I said that this tournament wasn't one of the main influencers in the decision to reboot Lightning Speed again. As Nias and Yang proceeded through the main plotline of each round, which was decided by the judges and fleshed out by the competitors, the two of them had their own plotline running. Over the course of the tournament, Yang aimed to tear down Nias' psyche in order to cause Nias to give Yang control of his body. This succeeded in round 3, but Yang started to feel guilt. In the final round, Yang contemplated what he'd done and if it was even the right decision at all. And then there was no plot resolution because I forgot. I'm not going to mince words. Origins was kind of a rush job on my end. Even so, I genuinely tried my best to write the best story possible. I was learning from my competitors, and as my competition grew more and more formidable, I was starting to realize the flaws in my own writing. I was realizing the flaws in my structuring, my plot progression, my character motivations, and yes, even and especially the flaws in Nias and Yang as characters. Origins was an insanely helpful experience for me. I knew that Nias and Yang needed to change. I knew that Lightning Speed needed to change. It got me to think more about my writing as a whole, and while I hung on to LS2 for another year and a half afterward, I was making decisions that were changing the series more and more until eventually Diametrics happened. Yeah, we can actually indirectly thank Origins for Diametrics. Amazing. And I mean, Origins was just fun. If my homies ASP Ian and Courageous Kyla are out there, y'all know I had a heck of a good time writing y'all's characters. Finnick and Pallet were the best boys, and I loved them so much I brought them back in my final round despite it borderline breaking the rules, and Cameron and Yang hit it off so well that they straight up became out-of-universe best friends. It was great. The canon ending to Origins, though, was written by one Noodles Queen, and the way that they wrote Yang was absolutely gorgeous. I give a chef's kiss to that. I really was blessed to make it all the way to the final round of Origins, but I also think I was blessed to have lost when I did. I lost the final round, but it opened my eyes to my flaws. It was an amazing experience. Pfft, you guys didn't come to hear me gush about an OCT from 6 years ago. I think if you want the details on Origins, go look for my entries. Sadly, the group for Origins is deactivated now, but nearly all of the entries pertaining to Nias and Yang still remain. The only missing piece is Noodles Queen's final round entry, which is a shame, but the rest still exist. I'll admit that my Origins entries aren't my finest work, and they are kind of jank, but they're probably the best piece of LS1 anything that exists, so I can still recommend it. You know, speaking of LS2, you guys want to know what I was planning for it?